My friends, welcome back. I'm still going down this rabbit hole of the Zadok Calendar. I want to thank you all that responded to my last video and what I said there. Many of you sent me some information, several emails, a lot of private messages, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you being civil and nice. And as you know, as I'm trying to be with this, you guys, one thing I tell my students when we're searching codes is for any given topic is you can't go into the research with a preconceived notion, with bias and all these kinds of things, because what will happen in any kind of experiment, any kind of research, your results could get screwed. Okay, so you want the information to fall as it is, and it is what it is, right? So I've considered a lot of the things that you guys have sent to me, and I say with respect, I can see where you guys are putting all this together, and it does look like that this calendar has to be constructed, even with the calendation of days, the adding of to this 360 days plus 4, right? And I can see where you get that. I can read that in the text. And by the way, I don't think that a lot of people that follow this calendar have actually gone and read the book of Jubilees and Enoch. And one thing I have noticed with you guys, the same with the lunar solar or with any other book, you're going to have a spectrum. Like with our community, there are people that keep the calendar differently, even in our own little niche. Some do it completely backwards from what we do it. New moon is full moon is new moon, all that kind of stuff. Keeping the new moon on the full moon. So I can see that with the Zadok people, because I hear some people saying that, well, the calendar's in the book of Enoch. And then some will say, no, it's not in Enoch, it's in Jubilees. And then there's others that say it's in both, right? So I have to go and read everything that they're talking about and sift through that. And I got to tell you guys, I'm just not at a place where I could really grab onto this. And I made a promise to you that if anybody could show me this calendar, and more importantly, show me this in the Bible, I would be more than willing. I would love to teach it. I just want to teach truth. But everything I've been sent, for the exception of information on Zadok, the information on Zadok was basically the only Bible verses and chapters I got. Okay, so we've established there's a person named Zadok. There were sons of Zadok. We can also establish that Zadok was a Levite, and he wasn't a head of a group called the Zadokah, nor was there anybody in Qumran in the Dead Sea named the Zadokah. And so there's a lot of twisting things, and the additional information that people are pointing me to are to those that are teaching this calendar, and Monty Judah, for example. But yet when you go to him, he doesn't really teach the calendar, chapter and verse, all that kind of thing. Ken Johnson, on the other hand, has a theory on some things, and I believe that people are gleaning from that. We must understand that he's not established anything. There's speculation. There's debate among that community, and sometimes polar opposites on the debate on what is what and what means what. For instance, the two discs that were found. It wasn't one, you guys. There were two clay disc-like things that was basically a way of keeping record. It wasn't necessarily a sundial. Um, I can see where the one that's kept the solar was very similar to what we read in Enoch. So I can see where people make that connection. I can see that. I can also see that the book of Jubilees not only contradicts itself, but it contradicts the Bible, and it also contradicts what's in Enoch. So we can't say that we're using both books to say that the Zadok Calendar is a real thing. We can't do that because they all contradict. And we're going to read a lot of this. I'm going to mustache again is tickling my nose. We're going to read from Jubilees and from the Bible and from Enoch and try to clear some things up. I was telling you in the last video that in particular Enoch, around chapters 71, 72, 73, it goes into the luminaries and it's explained. And the way it's explained is very much like a clock. If you can imagine the Mazzaroth as a celestial clock. And there are gates, right? It's broken up into 12. If you think of the sun and the moon as the big hand and the little hand on the clock, the sun goes through each one of the signs in the Mazzaroth. Every month it's in a new one, okay? The moon, on the other hand, goes through all of the Mazzaroth in 1 month. It's roughly every 2 days it's in a new sign. It's constantly moving. So we are talking about the big hand and little hand of the clock. But at the same time, they're working together and they're dictating the seasons. Now, it is true that if you only follow the moon, you'll end up with short days. But the same is true about the sun, you guys. You need the sun and the moon to declare the year or to reconcile the year. You can't just, you'll eventually, you'll lose time. I want to interject right here. Now, I recorded this video last night. This is a new day, but when I went to bed, I was thinking about, man, because I did this with a bad headache. I was thinking about all the places where I missed, so I misspoke or missaid something, or things I left out, and it bothered me that I did that. So I want to clarify here this part about getting the days, counting the days right, because, and I get this, that if you hear me talk about that, the solar-lunar is 29.5 days. That's an average, folks. I shouldn't have left it dead-ended like that for you guys because that's an average. My point was we have to put the new moon in its place. The thing about a new moon is it's not always 1 day. There's like 5 months where it's 2 days. Okay, so but if you had taken what I'd said, 29.5 days, and you multiplied that by 12, you in fact do get 354. And it's just like following only the moon, because you're going to do the same thing's going to happen. You're going to lose days if you don't have both hands of the clock. So the new moon day, or when there's no moon, is very important because it's not always 1 day. Roughly half the months of the year, or 5 months of the year around, there's going to be a two-day new moon, which means there goes your 10 days that you say we lost. No, they're still there. We counted the new moon properly, correctly, like it says in Jubilees, and we do address that at some point. But again, remember, I was very tired when I recorded this. Bad headache. Been doing a lot of reading, a lot of cramming to get this right. Okay, so I might misspeak a little bit in this, but I'll try to make sure I correct myself. But the point is, if you don't reconcile the new moon correctly, just like Jubilee says, you will be off on your days. And I just told you
It's not always one day of a new moon, and that is counted separate from the weeks, you guys, because it divides the months. So we don't start counting weekdays or anything else until we get through that new moon phase. Okay, so whether it's one day or 2 days, and remember, roughly 5 months a year, it's going to be 2 days. Just like because we on the Gregorian calendar we have some months that has 31 days, right? Some months are longer. So there's going to be in that pause we call the new moon, there's going to be sometimes that it's 2 days. So we're not losing 10 days on that calendar. I just want to be very clear on that. You have to reconcile the new moon correctly for this to get right. If you ignore the new moon and keeping, you know, just keeping the weeks, especially if you have a fixed day, you will lose days. All right. So back to last night.
And the seasons get out of order if you only go by one or the other. So some cultures do. The Muslims only go by the moon. And I do believe they have like a 354 year, day year, something like that. By the way, in ancient times, we can see across all the cultures of the world, from China to Israel to the Middle East to India, everywhere, every calendar year was 360 days, folks, by the way. Incidentally, this is established also in the book of Enoch. And this is where we get a contradiction between Enoch and Jubilees. Jubilees says it's 364 days, and Enoch clearly is showing you that there's 360 days.
This is a little bit confusing because it does say 360, but it also says 364 in another place. And I speak about this a little bit later because we're going to read Enoch, and it does say in there is 364. But there's also a place where it says that it's 12 months divided into 30 days. Okay. So, and I couldn't find that again. A lot of reading is hard to remember. I should have took notes on where I was reading things at, but correcting myself, technically they both do say 364th, but also Enoch has got outlined a 360 day. So there's a little bit of confusion there.
In a year, but something changed. Obviously, something changed. Enoch comes before the book of Jubilees. And then what we have today in what we're keeping as a calendar year, 365 days, and this is measured scientifically with instruments that measure, so we know, to the decimal point, how long a calendar year is. And this always coincides with the equinox. And Enoch also teaches this. It doesn't say the word equinox, but if you look at the language that he's talking, the language in the way he's speaking, it's almost difficult to read, talking about gates and luminaries, and you're going to see here in just a moment. I can see where one gets lost in it, but I cannot see where we get this notion of a Zadok calendar, because first of all, Zadok was a priest, and we can see from the Bible, for instance, can we go to Psalm 81? I hear people saying, well, the moon observation comes from Babylon. Well, folks, they might have been doing a lot in Babylon. They were doing a lot in Sodom and Gomorrah, and they do a lot everywhere else. But that has nothing to do with what the Bible teaches us. The Father created the sun, moon, and the stars. And it's for his pleasure. Okay? What Babylon does is their own business. But what he sets as a standard is his business. Okay? So he says, blow the trumpet. And by the way, this is Asaph saying this. Asaph is a Levite, a priest. And he is telling us blow the trumpet in the new moon in the appointed time on our solemn feast day. Now, I love to do this. I love to go to the interlinear. And just look at this a little closer, especially in the Hebrew, because we see something really interesting. There's a difference between new moon and full moon, which is what it actually says in the Hebrew. King James is not the best translation of this, but it says, blow the trumpet at the new moon and at the full moon on the day of our solemn feast. And you can see the words here, Bachodesh or Chodesh, it's got a bet in front of it, so it's at the new moon. And Bachaseh at the full moon. And this is what the word we were talking about the other day, Kaseh. That could be polar, as many other words are. They could be a positive and a negative. But in this case, because Kaseh means covered, and people interpret, King James interpret this as the full moon, because the Chodesh has always been understood. And I've heard people come against this word right here, Chodesh. It does not mean moon. It means month. Well, there's such thing in grammar as synonyms, where you can have a word that means, has two. Anyway, it means both, depending on the context. Now, if you're talking about the moon exclusively, it would be Yirach. And that is correct, Yirach. But new moon.
I just want to comment there. I just got another email on this word this morning where people are coming against it. And it's always somebody who's coming against it in a video or something like that, some YouTube scholar or something. But across academia, this has always been. Chodesh is understood universally as either month or moon. Now, if we're talking about the moon exclusively as the subject, it is indeed Yirach. But if we're talking about the month, and more in particular, the head of the month, it's new moon, because they mark the part where there's no moon, and remember, it can be 1 or 2 days, divides the months. Okay? So it is a word. It is a word. It's not a conspiracy, you guys. It's in the Strongs. It's in every Bible, except for maybe if you've got a Bible that someone else has redone, and they conveniently like to leave this out because they're against the word. But universally, every other Bible, every other Hebrew script is going to tell you that. That's a fact.
Or new month, because they are the same. They're on the same of the month and of the same. Interesting. The term Chodesh primarily refers to a concept of new moon or month in the Hebrew calendar. It signifies the beginning of a new lunar cycle, which is crucial for timekeeping in ancient Israel. The new moon marked the start of each month and was often associated with religious observances and offerings. And that's true. You can go on and read it exhaustively. Go on and read everything about where the Bible talks about moon or new month.
And I just kind of skipped over. Let me back that up a little bit.
As the full moon.
Sorry, you guys. I meant to read.
Because they are the same. They're on the same of the month and of the same.
I scroll up and I meant to read this, but I didn't. So we're going to do that in just now, because this is an agricultural.
The term Chodesh primarily refers to a concept of new moon.
All right, so I read that already. Here we go. The cultural and historical background. In ancient Israel, the lunar calendar was central to religious and agricultural life. The new moon, or Chodesh, was a significant event marked by sacrifices and celebrations. And one thing we need to remember about the biblical calendar is it's agricultural. We cannot ignore the grain, and you cannot fix days in the week because the grain's not going to care, right? The grain don't know what you're doing. So we have to keep in mind that the planting and harvesting cycles and all that has to be part. We can't fix days in the calendar. All right. So I wanted to make sure we read that. I do show that this term is mentioned throughout the Bible all over, and it's always referring to the same thing.
Or month in the Hebrew calendar. It signifies the beginning of a new lunar cycle, which is crucial for timekeeping in ancient Israel. The new moon marked the start of each month and was often associated with religious observances and offerings. And that's true. You can go on and read it exhaustively. Go on and read everything about where the Bible talks about moon or new month. There's no getting around this. This is not from Babylon, folks. Calendar months. But Chodesh, in the new moon, in the new month, is what it means. And this is universal, folks. I see, and I love him to death, but has no business teaching Hebrew. And Hebrew.
I just noticed here where it says here, monthly new moon from Chodesh, the new moon, by implication. So it's meant to imply the same thing, month and moon. It's meant to it's meant through implication, the same thing. Okay.
Words. I can't even pronounce them right, and teaching you guys the wrong meaning of a word. The Chodesh is universally known. It is not a conspiracy. It is not a mistake. It's not somebody from King James no. You can ask anybody who speaks Hebrew what that means, Chodesh, and they'll tell you it means a new month or a new moon, and they go together. So it's not a mistranslation. It's not from Babylon. New moon, a month. Okay, so let's just be really clear on it. So blow the trumpet at the time of the new moon and at the full moon. And folks, I'm sparing you from going through all of the verses of talking about keeping a new moon. It was very clear that David kept it, Zadok kept it. Zadok knew exactly what it was. And it must have been the same way all the way up to and after Yeshua, because Yeshua never addressed it in any discrepancy with the calendar or keeping the calendar. And I noticed that in Jubilees, it does mention discrepancy with the calendar in accordance with keeping, days and new moons and all that kind of stuff. We're going to read that here in just a moment. But, the author actually has an insert in that verse of something that he says that I think stands out. It's almost like when someone's lying because of what they said to preface something. For instance, I'm not the one to spread gossip, and then they proceed to tell you gossip. It's sort of like that. It's almost comical when you read it. But anyway, back to the moon. It's very clear. We can go to Psalm 104:19. Now, I want to compare this to Jubilees 2, okay? Because let's look at Jubilees 2 first. And this is why I'm pointing this out. Somebody sent me this, and it's kind of cute. It's only a minute 47 seconds, but this is what I'm talking about. When I'm interested, when I want you to teach me this calendar, this is not appropriate to send me because this is not teaching me the calendar. This might be an introduction of the concept, right? I'm not going to play sound on this. But yeah, it's basically introducing, and maybe you wanted me to go to that website. I don't know. But here we go. So it starts talking about who Zadok was. And this is true. This is absolutely true. Zadok was a Levitical high, look at the word, Levi, a high priest during the reign of David. That is correct. I agree with that. I agree with the lineage of Zadok. However, we do need to remember at some point before Yeshua, and this came during the Maccabee rebellion, okay, when the Greeks came in, this is when the priesthood was corrupted. Jonathan Maccabee, and you can see in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the wicked high priest.
All right, now this is where I misspeak. There are two brothers, Jonathan and Judah, Maccabee, right? But we read in the Dead Sea Scrolls where it's talking about, and this is commonly understood but from scholars, that the Essenes wrote this, who had removed themselves from the temple in Jerusalem, and they had a library in Qumran. They did not agree with the priesthood. Because why? Because Judah Maccabee, not Jonathan. I misspoke there. And see, I can admit when I'm wrong. Judah Maccabee put himself as the high priest. You can go read this in Maccabees. Well, a writer, probably a Essenes in the Dead Sea Scrolls, writes about a wicked high priest. And there's a consensus with a lot of scholars who believe that this is Judah Maccabee that it's talking about. But it also talks about the Zadok, the righteous teacher. Okay, but it's not talking about a priesthood, the righteous teacher. Don't get hung up on the word Zedek, okay, which is it's a root form of Zadok. Okay. We've already gone into what Zadokah means. Zadokah means justice. It does not mean a people group. Okay. So I had to correct myself here once again. Sorry about that.
Priest, that is who they're talking about. They're talking about Jonathan Maccabee, who, guess where he was from? He was from the tribe of Judah. He was not a Levite. So there were a lot of people mad. And this is where the exile of the Levites from the temple began. Okay. So what is this? This is a couple hundred years before Yeshua, during the time of the Greeks. So it was already being corrupted. And if you can look at the history of the changing of the guard, so to speak, between Pharisees and Sadducees, and there came a point where the priesthood was a political appointment. And so at the time of Yeshua, Caiaphas was not a legitimate high priest, you guys. He was half Greek. Caiaphas is a Greek name. This is called a Hellenized Jew. Okay? So there was corruption in the priesthood, but there was no corruption in the calendar. They stayed on the same calendar even when they came out of Babylon. I don't believe that they ever lost understanding the sun, moon, and stars. Most ancient people understood the clock in the sky. Okay? So I agree with a lot that's being.
Let me just clarify what I just said there. They do go off the calendar at some point, but what I meant to say was not during the time of Yeshua. It wasn't corrupted by then, and they didn't forget how to do it by then. Okay? We're talking about when they go into exile, when the nations and even Jews are thrown out of the land, and they forget who they are, right? The northern 10 tribes that go into exile, they're going to forget who they are, going to forget the calendar and all that kind of stuff. So it does eventually happen.
I said here, Zadok does have a lineage, and that was some of the verses you guys were sending me. This right here from Ezekiel, that the sons of Zadok are mentioned in Ezekiel's vision, but says nothing about he's going to, there's a calendar called the Zadok. If anything, if Ezekiel's establishing all this, and I believe that he's going to be rectifying the problems with the calendar, I don't think it's the Zadok calendar. I think it's the original calendar in the sky. Yah's calendar is not fixed with the Gregorian calendar. Because there's some absurd things in here, like it's implied, not implied. It's just dictated or declared that the first day is going to be a Wednesday, right? As if there was a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday in the time of Yah. There wasn't. I mean, even in the time of Yeshua, the Julian calendar was much different than the Gregorian that we have today. They had 8-day weeks. So that would throw things off. Plus, when they changed it to the Gregorian, there were 10 days lost from the calendar. What do you do about that? Because that throws everything off from the 7-day continual cycle from creation on day 4, which was a Wednesday. There's no way to prove that it goes, fits as a Wednesday. And furthermore, there's nothing that says that Yeshua rose on Sunday. Because I know there was a time when Remnant House was forcing this calendar to fit with Resurrection Sunday. So there was all kinds of, anyway. So it says there's 364 days, 52 weeks. So it's 12 months of 30 days plus 4. And this is because Jubilees says that. So the sun, moon, and stars are created on day 4. The Bible does say that. So Wednesday is considered the first day of. How do you prove that? How do you prove to me that a Gregorian day of the week, or a pagan day of the week, by the way, was a Wednesday? That's just hard for me to accept that. But this is part of that intercalation thing. So the New Year's Day on the Zadok calendar would always be on day 4, a Wednesday. Yet there is no biblical proof given. It's a declaration. And I happen to remember somebody say, we don't debate, we declare. That's the most foolish thing I've ever heard, especially when it comes to the Bible. We're told to rightly divide the word, and we're supposed to engage one another in rightly dividing the word, testing all things, correct? So it's hard for me to come to the point where I can get on board with that. And then it goes on. Zadok calendar assigns fixed days of the week for all the major feasts and appointed times. In other words, every year, your Passover is going to fall on April 1st. Is that what we're saying? It's established now that April 1st is the Passover for you guys. I'm not going to say what I'm thinking about that, but I'll let you think about it for a moment. April 1st. First of all, we cannot fix the days. The Bible clearly says that the sun and the moon must be observed together. Psalm 104:19, right? But I want to compare what it says in Jubilees, right here, Jubilees 2, to what it says in the Bible. Now, in everything about the technical calendar part, the scripture or the text that I'm given is either go to Enoch or go to Jubilees. There's no Bible verses given to me for this Zadok calendar. Only the lineages of Zadok or the sons of Zadok are going to come back and they're going to establish, everything in its right order. But still, that's not enough to say that it's the Zadok calendar. Okay, so let's go to Jubilees 2. I'm going to look at this a little bit deeper because that's a brief overview of Jubilees 2 there. Let's look at it, what it says in the completion of it. And God appointed the sun to be a great sign on earth for the days and for the Sabbaths and for the months and for the feasts and for the years and for the Sabbaths of years and for Jubilees and for all the seasons of the years. No mention of the moon. And this is why I could see you guys are keeping a solar-only calendar, right? I get it. I can see why that is. But let me take you to the Bible. And we compare what it says in the Bible to what it says in Jubilees. It says the sun is the one that determines all these things, right? In Jubilees. Okay. So Asaph, one of the Levite priests, Psalm 114, he appointed the moon for seasons. The sun knows going down. All right, I just want to point this out right here. Look, when the moon, Yareah or Yarah, right? The moon, it's a subject matter. We're talking about the moon as a subject, as the topic, right? So he appointed the moon for seasons, Moedim, and the sun knows it's going down, right? So this is where we use the word moon and not Chodesh, right? It doesn't say he appointed the Chodesh for seasons, because that's specifically talking about the new moon. When we're talking about the moon in relation to the seasons, then it's a different way of using words. We use the word the moon, right? Or Yerach. So here we go. He appointed the moon for seasons, or Moedim. That moon, that word seasons is Moedim. See this word Moedim? Let's go look at it. Appointed time, meeting, assemble, festival. An appointment, a fixed time, a season, a festival, right? So the Bible is telling us that the moon is the one that actually determines all these appointed times. But Jubilees is telling you the exact polar opposite. Which one do we follow? The Bible or Jubilees? The Hebrew word moed primarily refers to an appointment time, place, often in the context of sacred festivals, religious gatherings, divinely appointed meetings, Shabbats. Yeah. So moed is the word there. The moon, he appointed the moon for the moed. That's an all-encapsulating word there. You can't get no clearer. But back over in Jubilees 2, the author is telling you something contrary to what the Bible says. And like I said, Jubilees has 28 of these, and they all deal with the calendar. Now let me take you to Jubilee 6, because I want to show you something here. People like to throw this at me with the solar-lunar calendar. We keep the solar-lunar calendar. We track the sun and the moon. Okay? Jubilee 6 is really interesting, because I think the interpolator, and you need to Google that, the interpolations of Jubilees. Go read that. It's a published paper by a scholar. Jubilees 6, and I want to start. Let's start at 19. But Abraham observed it, and Isaac, and we're talking about the order of things, and apparently he's looking at some holy tablets. Okay, and it says, excuse me, let's go back to 17. And for this reason he had ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month once a year and renew a covenant year and year. You know, first of all, I want to point that out, because I pointed out to you about the 50 count. And I think this is where we get a lot of error, because things are drawn from this too. And I don't really want to dive into that too much. We're going to talk about that when we get into the Feast of Weeks and we start looking at wheat. But even right here, the author is telling you that, there's something about the Feast of Weeks. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah, 26 jubilees and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his son observed it for 7 jubilees and 1 week of years until the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death and his sons did away with it until Abraham, and they ate blood. But Abraham observed it. Isaac and Jacob and his children observed it up into thy days. And in thy days the children of Israel forgot it until they celebrated it anew on this mountain. And do thou command the children of Israel to.
All right, so we're talking, what mountain are we talking about? We're talking about Sinai. So the author is implying that we're now at Sinai with the descendants of Isaac and Jacob with the Exodus. Okay, that's what he's implying there.
Observe this festival and all their generations for a commandment unto them. One day in the year, in this month, they shall celebrate the festival. And for it is the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits, and the feast is twofold.
And by the way, you guys, the Feast of Weeks, like I said, we're going to get into that and talk about it, is a festival just like the wave sheet. It's a first fruits festival, right? So at the beginning of the wheat harvest, just like with barley, you're going to take some stalks of grain and we're going to wave the sheaves. That's a first fruit offering, right? The same thing happens at Shavuot. I'm not talking about Pentecost. I'm talking about Shavuot, the real day, which starts the beginning of the wheat harvest. The wheat harvest is going to run from there all the way through the summer until we get to Sukkot. Matter of fact, the feast that we're celebrating on that end is a celebration of all the harvest is completed, all the grapes, all the barley, all the wheat, everything. And we're making wine. All that is already done by the time we're in Sukkot. Sukkot is we're finished the whole cycle. Okay, so keep that in mind. That's what it means by the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits, because we're waving loaves of bread at that time. So we're not taking stalks of wheat and waving it. We're taking stalks of wheat, threshing it. This is before the fields are harvested. We're taking some of the first fruit, threshing it, making flour, making bread, and waving the bread. And then we're still harvesting all the way through till the end of summer. And then we go into the feast that celebrate the end of those harvests.
And double nature, according to what is written and engraven concerning it, celebrated. For I have written in the book of the law, and in which I have written for thee, that thou shouldst celebrate it in its season. Now we're talking about the feast. One day in a year, and I explain it to thee that it sacrifices that the children of Israel should remember and should celebrate it through the generations in this month, one day in every year. And on the new moon of the first month, even in Jubilees, you can see the observation of the moon.
Just a quick question here. Is that also a grammatical error that in Jubilees, which is clearly the children are observing the moon, and we see the English, the new moon there, even though it doesn't says Chodesh, we can see that there's a moon involved, right? Everybody see that? So even in Jubilees, we get a confirmation that they were following the moon. Okay, so there's a warning a little bit further down to say, now if they neglect to do so and disobey the commandments, they will mess up. It does not say if you decide to follow the moon, you're going to mess up with the days. It's not saying that. It's understood. We're following the moon, and if you do it wrong, you're going to get the days messed up. That's what he's saying there.
And on the new moon of the first month, and on the new moon of the fourth month, and on the new moon of the seventh month, and on the new moon of the 10th month, and the days of remembrance, and the days of seasons in its 4 divisions of a year, that is written and ordained in the testimony forever. And Noah ordained them for himself at peace and for the generations forever. So they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new moon of the first month, when he was bidden to make for himself an ark, and on that day the earth became dry, and opened the ark and saw the earth. And on the new moon of the fourth month, of the mouths of the depths and of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the new moon of the seventh month, and all the mouths of the abyss were open, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the new moon of the 10th month, and on the top of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. And on this account he ordained for himself as feast for a memorial forever and ever, and they ordained. And they had placed on them the heavenly tablets, each written 13 weeks, from one to another, past their memorial, from the first to the second, and the second to the third, and from the third to the fourth. And all the days of the commandment will be in 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus the engraven and ordained on heavenly tablets. And there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year from year to year. And thou commanded thou that the children of Israel, that they observe the years according to its reckoning, 364 days. And I will constitute a complete year. And these will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb it from its time and its days, from its feast, for everything will fall out of them according to their testimony, and they will not leave out any day nor disturb any feast. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all their seasons and years.
Now look what it just said there. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment. What commandment? Where are the commandments at? Is it in Jubilees? Or we're talking about the Bible? Folks, you got to make a decision here. You're going to pull your doctrine from what you think or what someone is teaching you from Jubilees is true, and completely ignoring what the Bible is. I think that's dangerous. But it clearly says there, but if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb their seasons. Do you see that? And then when we're talking about the new moon, well, let me just finish reading here and I'll stop it again. When we're talking about the new moon, I explained that earlier. If you don't do it correctly, you're going to get off.
And it will be dislodged from their order, and they will disturb the seasons and the years, and will be dislodged, and will neglect all the ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and not find the path of years, and will forget the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths, and will go wrong as to the order of the years. Right? And they did. For I know from henceforth will I declare unto thee, and this is really interesting that he says this. For I know, and from henceforth will I declare it to thee. And watch what he says. And it's not of my own devising. He's making that really clear. That's kind of suspicious to me. And he's saying, for the book lies written.
Now the reason I say that is because the scholar that wrote the interpolations of Jubilees is pointing out that the author is like what I said earlier. I'm not the one to spread gossip. And he goes and spreads the gossip. And it's not of my own devising. This is coming from the tablets. And by the way, apparently they're the only one to see the tablets. We haven't seen these tablets, sort of like the emerald tablets of Thoth, right? With old Billy Carson over there. It's not of my own devising.
And before me. Now, nobody's seen these heavenly tablets. And if you're telling me that that's what they cut in Qumran, we have not seen any heavenly tablets that has established this. But he says, not among for the book lies written before me. Interesting, it says lies like that. Written before me. And on the heavenly tablets, the division of days is ordained, lest they forget the feast of the covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles after the error and after the ignorance. For there will be those who assuredly make observations of the moon and how it disturbs the seasons and comes from year to year. Now, what this is saying here is he's saying, now there will be
those who will assuredly make observations of the moon and incorrectly, and how it disturbs the season and comes from year to year 10 days too soon. Too soon. Remember what I said. If we don't do it correctly and we don't keep his commandment, right? Because we got to mark the new moon. Sometimes it's 1 day, sometimes it's 2 days. If you don't do that correctly, you're going to miss that 2-day new moon, and your days are going to stack up without them, with the 7-day count and all that kind of stuff. If you don't observe that second day of new moon, and remember, this is something that marks between the months. So we're holding at that day before we start our first work day, which is going to be day 2 on the calendar. Is going to be your first work day on the calendar. If it's a 1 day. So keep that in mind. It can be a new moon day 1 day or 2 days, right? But that's what it's saying right here, that there will be those that assuredly make observations of the moon, and it may be just the moon itself that he's talking about, but he's not telling us that we should not observe the moon. That is not what that is saying here, folks. It's telling us there will be those that make and be wrong in their observation. We even see that in our own community, where some people keep the new moon as the full moon, which is completely backwards from what we do. That does throw everything off, doing that. You keep keeping things two weeks different in the month. Let's continue. 10 days too soon, 354 days. This is correct. So there's an oscillation. If you do not, and by the way, if you do not observe the new moon correctly, you'll be missing 10 days of the year. But if you observe that new moon, it's a whole day. It's technically, there's no moon there. You don't see it. It's hidden, it's concealed, but it's still a day. Now, some lunar solar calendar people only, keep the first sliver as a new moon, but it's still a day that we have to account for. If you just blow through there and don't observe it and do a straight count of 7, 1 through 7, straight count of 7, it will get out of line, folks. And it will be about 10 days every year. I've explained this over and over again. It has to do with the new moon. It even tells us here that if they don't observe it right, talking about the new moon, everything will fall out. And but if they do neglect and do not observe them, if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, what's his commandment? That's from the Bible. Then they will disturb their seasons and years, and it will be dislodged, and they will disturb the season. So they will, if they neglect and don't keep it as he said. And he says, and they will forget and will not find the path of years, and will forget the new moons and the seasons, right? So they're forgetting all that. And so he's telling us here, for I know from henceforth that I will declare to thee, and it's not of my own devising, for the book lies before me, and on the heavenly tablets, lest they forget the feast of thy covenant and walk according to the feast of the Gentiles, that's happened. I mean, Christians keep Easter and Christmas and all that kind of stuff after their error and their ignorance. For there will be those who assuredly make observations of the moon and how it disturbs the season and comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. And I think that's because they don't keep the new moon. For this reason, the years will come upon them and they will disturb the order, right? So this is not telling you not to keep the new moon or not observe the moon. It's saying, there's going to come a point where they forget how to, and they're going to neglect to, and things are going to fall out of order. That has happened. Matter of fact, since Hillel established the Saturday observance, and folks, this has not been since creation. The Saturday observance came in after Constantine came on the scene. They were going by the lunar solar calendar until it was fixed
to a day, and that was under Constantine. That's a historical fact, right? But since that time to now, because they fixed the days, it has got out of order. They will admit that we are somewhere between 220 and 230 years off on the calendar because it compiles over the years. It gets worse if you don't keep it according to the sun and the moon. You can't just go by one and not the other, and that includes the sun. Okay, so we've covered Jubilee 6. We've covered Jubilees 2. Jubilees 2 clearly contradicts, and there's 28 other ones where it contradicts the Bible. Now, let's go to Enoch. I want to go to Enoch because Enoch is where, and I think this is where they get what's called the Enochian calendar. And Zen Garcia teaches the Enochian calendar, which is basically the lunar solar calendar. Now, why would he be calling it that? Anybody know? Because if you go read Enoch chapter 71 through chapter 73, it tells you the purpose of the luminaries of heaven, the sun, moon, and stars. It is a big clock. So let's read from chapter 71 right here. The book of Revolution of the luminaries of heaven according to their respective classes and their respective powers and their respective periods, their respective names and the places where they commence their progress and their respective months, which Uriel, the holy angel, who was with me, explained to me. He who conducts them, the whole count of them, according to every year of the world, forever, until a new work shall be effected, which shall be eternal. This is the first law of the luminaries. The sun and the light arrive at the gates of heaven, which are on the east, and on the west of the western gates of heaven. And I beheld the gates, which the sun goes forth, and the gate, right? What is Psalm 104:19 says? The sun knows it's going forth. I beheld the gates which the sun goes forth, and the gates where the sun sets, and which the gates which also the moon rises and sets, and beheld the conductors of the stars. Okay, so the sun and the moon is moving among the 12 signs in the Mazarah, zodiac, whatever you want to call it. It's a big clock. The sun is moving one place every month. So it takes 30 days for the sun to move to a new sign, right? Like we just came out of Pisces season, going into Aries season. The moon goes through all of the signs in 30 days. It moves to each one every 2 days. Okay, so there is a clock that Yah has put in motion. It is his clock. It determines everything. All these respectively, one after another, are on a level, and numerous windows are on the right and left sides of those gates. First proceeds forth that great luminary, which is called the sun, the orb of which the orb of heaven, the whole of it being repleted with splendid and flaming fire. Its chariot, which it ascends, and the wind blows. The sun sets in heaven, and returning by the north to proceed toward the east, is conducted so as to enter by the gate and illuminated the face of heaven. In the same manner goes forth in the first month by the great gate, and goes forth through the fourth of those 6 gates, which are rising of the sun. And the fourth gate, we're talking about, so each one of those signs are divided into 4. So you got 3, 3, 3, 3. It's divided into 4 parts, 3, 6, 9, 12. Right? So these are the gates. When the sun rises in heaven, it goes forth through the 4th gate, 30 days, and by the 4th gate of the west heaven on a level. Right? So the sun goes through its 4th gate. Right? So we're going to another sign, 30 days, and by the 4th gate of the west heaven on the level, it descends. During that period, a day is lengthened from the day, and the night curtailed from the night of 30 days. And the day is longer by 2 parts than the night. So we're talking about equinox. When we get to the point where time changes, you guys, where they do the time change, that's at equinox time. The day is precisely 10 parts and the night is 8. The sun goes forth through its fourth gate and sets in it and turns into the fifth gate during 30 days, which it proceeds from and sets in the fifth gate. And then the day becomes lengthened by a second portion so that the 11 parts, while the night becomes shortened and it's only 7 parts. So again, this is the time change where, you get longer days or longer nights. Okay. The sun now returns to the east, entering into the sixth gate and riding into the sixth gate on the 31 days account of its sign. And the period of the day is longer at the night and twice as long as the night becomes 12 parts. And the night is shortened and becomes 6 parts, and the sun rises up that the day may be short and the night lengthened. And the sun retorts to the east, returning to the sixth gate where it rises and sets for 30 days. When that period is completed, the day becomes short, precisely 1 part, and so that 11 parts while the night is 7.
I know. It's a little confusing, but what it's talking about here is the sun and the moon going through the different gates in the sky. So you got 12, and then they're divided by 4. So you got 3, 3, 3, and 3, right? All right. So it's a little confusing when you're reading through here, but basically you can see that there is this dance, there is this order between the sun and the moon. I'm going to skip through this in just a moment, you guys, and go on to the other chapters talking about the moon. So bear with me, please.
Parts. So the sun goes from the west, and from the sixth gate proceeds. So it's proceeding through all the gates, you guys, all through the Maseroth. All right. And it's just going to keep repeating that. I kind of don't want to keep you guys too long because this is a lot to read here. And I want to get to the other 2 chapters. And at that period, the night is lengthened from day during 30 mornings, and that the day is curtailed from the day during 30 days, and that the night being 10 parts precisely, and the day 8 parts. So it's showing us as the progression, all the parts. It's basically talking about the hour hand, the minute hand, and the seconds hand, basically is what we're talking about here, and all the parts that it's going through. Okay. Let's go on down to 72, because this is important to get to that. Let's go to chapter 72. And this is the law I beheld, another law of an inferior luminary, the name of which is the moon, and the orb of which is the orb of heaven. Its chariot, which it secretly ascends, and the wind blows. The light is given to it by measure. Every month at its exit and entrance, it becomes changed. Its periods are the periods of the sun. And when in like manner the light is to exist, its light is a 7th portion of the light of the sun. Thus it rises, and at its commencement towards the east goes forth 30 days. At that time it appears, it becomes to you the beginning of the month. 30 days is what 30 days it is with the sun in the gate from which the sun goes forth. Now we need to say this. The book of Enoch teaches us that the calendar year is 360 days. And as I told you,
+4. Here's where I misspoke. I did see that where I was reading, I read the whole book of Enoch, and I did see it somewhere where it talks about that it's 12 months of 30 days. Each were even. Anyway, you have to do intercalations on any calendar, by the way, even the Gregorian. That's why we have leap years. So it's with every single one of them. But here again, I was tired, and I was trying to explain this, and getting ahead of myself. Enoch does show that it's 360 and add 4.
Beginning of this, most cultures believe this and observe this. And the reason it's changed is because something perturbed our solar system and changed this. I suspect it's the very same object, Planet X, whatever you want to call it, that was present at the time of Julius Caesar's death and also at the crucifixion, folks. The 6 hour, but we can also see in the text as well, Joshua's long day. as high as 12 degrees or, 10 degrees, 12 degrees, whatever it was. Okay. This is perturbation of our sun and moon. So things changed. We suddenly went from a 360-day year, and now where are we at? 365, right? Half of it is an extent 7 portion, and 1/2, and the whole of its orb is void of light, except a 7th portion out of the 14 portions of its light. Now, the 14 portions, we're talking about luminaries. For every day, starting from no moon, the first crescent you see, which will be about 2%, maybe 1%. If it's 1%, you can barely see it. Most of the time, it's 2%. There's 15 portions. So starting from no moon, there are 15 luminaries to the full moon. Okay? And then waning from that back to no moon again, 15 days. So you get 30, 29 and a half basically is what it comes out to, because that half is going to be split for the new moon.
And I probably shouldn't have said this or been a little more clear. We're pausing on that. It could be a 2-day new moon. It doesn't always come out to 29 and a half. That's the average for the whole year.
Period. Every month. This is where you can lose 10 days if you're not careful. You'll end up with, a mess. When the sun rises, the moon rises with it, receiving a half portion of light. On that night, when it commences its period, previously the day of the month, the moon sets with the sun. And on that night, it is dark and it is forgotten. Excuse me. And on that night, it is dark in its 14 portions. Okay, so the 15th portion would be that no moon. So it takes 14 lunations to be that full moon. Right? So it's dark here. It is dark in its 14 portions. So it's a new moon time. That is, and each half of it rises in a day with 1/7 portion precisely, and its in progress declines from the rising of the sun. During the remainder of its period, the light increases 14 portions. All right, let's go to 73. So that was telling us how the moon works and its luminations and its luminaries. Then I saw the progress and regulation which he effected in the law of the moon. The progress of the moons and everything related to them, Uriel showed me, the holy angel who conducted them all. Their station I wrote down as he showed me. I wrote down their months as they occur and appearance of their light until it's completed in 15 days. That's the 15 illuminations. So that first day, that new moon day, it's going to be no moon. But by the time you count 15 days, it's going to be a full moon. Everybody follow? That's what it means until the completion completed in 15 days. In each of its 2/7 portion, it completes. It's all light. So 7 portions, right? So that's 7 days times 2 is 14. And all its lights rising at the setting. On stated month, it changes its settings, and on stated months, it makes its progress through each gate. In 2 gates, the moon sets with the sun, right? So so it goes through 2 gates. In a day, I think that's what that is. Is it 2? Yeah, 2 every day. I'm getting confused here.
What I meant to say was it takes 2 days for the moon to go through each one. Again, I was tired, bad headache, but for each day of the moon, excuse me, for each 2 days of the moon, it's going through two gates. Anyway, I got a little confused there last night.
So the moon is moving through all 12, and I think it takes 2 days to go through one. Yes. Anyway, On stated months, it changes its settings, and on stated months, it makes its progress through each gate. And 2 gates, the moon sets with the sun visible. And those 2 gates, which are in the midst, in the 3rd and 4th gate, from the 3rd gate goes forth for 7 days and makes its circuit, talking about going around the earth as it orbits the earth, and again returns to the gate which the sun goes forth, right? So there's going to be times where the moon and the sun's going to come together. That's new moon time. When the moon is away from the sun, that's full moon time, right? So at full moon time, the sun is opposite the moon. Matter of fact, you could go outside at full moon, at the day of full moon, and as the sun is setting, the full moon is coming up over the horizon at the same time. Okay? So they're opposite. And by the way, that's the only time that you can have a lunar eclipse, is when the moon is the opposite. You cannot have a solar eclipse with the moon opposite. And that is what it was at the crucifixion. So something else passed in between the earth and the sun. The moon was in the wrong place. Okay? Everybody follow. But when it makes its circuit and comes back to where the sun is, in the east, on new moon day, the sun and the moon will rise together and you won't see the moon. It's because the sun is blinding you. You can't see it. The sun's in, the moon is in the veil of the sun. But there are certain times, and by the way, that's the same thing for, we're looking for at equinox. At equinox time, the position of the sun and the moon anyway. And it returns against to the date which the sun goes forward, and in completes the whole of its life. Then it declines from the sun and enters into 8 days of the 6th gate, and returns in 7 days to the 3rd gate, and from which the sun goes forth. And when the sun proceeds to the 4th gate, the moon goes forth for 7 days until it passes the 5th gate. And then it returns in 7 days to the 4th gate, and completing all its light, declines and passes by the 1st gate in 8 days. And returns in 7 days to the 4th gate, from which the sun goes forth. And thus I beheld their stations according to the fixed order of the month. According to the fixed order of the month, the sun rises and sets. So we're talking about a fixed order that Yah has established. And at those times, there's an excess of 30 days belonging to the sun in 5 years. And all the days belong to each of the years of the 5 years when completed, amount to 364 days. And the sun and stars belong 6 days in each of the 5 years. Thus, 30 days belong to them. So that the moon has 30 days less than the sun and stars. The moon brings on all the years exactly, and that their stations may come neither too forward nor too backwards a single day, but that the years may be changed with the correct precision in 364 days. And 3 years in 3 years, the days are 1,092, and 5 years that are 1,820, and in 8 years, 2,912 days. To the moon alone belong in 3 years 1,062 days, and in 5 years it has 50 days less than the sun, for an additional being made to 1,062 days. In 5 years there are 1,770 days, and in the days of the moon is 8 years or 2,832 days. Now there was somewhere, you guys, where I read in here, and that might be where we were skipping through, but where up here was talking about 364 days. I read somewhere in Enoch where it was 360 days, or excuse me, it was 12 months of 30 days, and if you multiply it, it's 360 days. So apparently Enoch also says it's 364 days, but it's only 1 day different than what we have now. But I thought I saw somewhere in here where it says that there was, maybe it's 72, and I just blew through it. Anyway, I thought I saw where it said 12 months of 30 days, and that's 360. So adding the 4 days, I see where you guys get that. How it becomes a Wednesday, I don't know. How you guys fix it to the Gregorian calendar is beyond me. We can clearly see that there's purpose for the sun and the moon together. They work together, whether it's 360 days, 364, or 365. That is what they do. They work together. And I apologize, you guys. I've been cramming this for several days. I got a bad headache right now that I'm trying to do this, but this is very important for me to get to the bottom of this. As a researcher, somebody who loves to study the Bible, it's very important. So I may misspeak, may misquote, may get some things wrong, but I try to correct myself. And as I said, I'm very open. If I can be convinced this is biblical, then I'm going to do it. But everything that I read, especially, from Enoch talking about the order of the luminaries, the purpose of the sun and the moon, I see a clock. But yet I hear you, some of the teachers you guys followed completely disregard the moon, completely disregard proper Hebrew in the word Chodesh, which means, new moon and new month. It's a synonym. It's illogical to me. And a lot of this is common sense. Like, it doesn't take me really long to determine whether I'm going to follow Psalm 104:19 or what it says in Jubilees 2 or in Jubilees 6. As an observer of the sun and the moon for my calendar, reading Jubilees 6, it makes sense to me what it's saying there. And the fact that if you neglect keeping the commandments and doing it right, that they were going to forget, and they were going to screw it up, and they were going to go wrong with the new moons and all that, and they were going to be, I could see that. But that's if you're not keeping it according to what he says. And so I don't get why that's thrown at me a lot, because as if it's a reason to not keep what the Bible says. Are you suggesting to me, because Jubilee says this, that it's impossible to keep it by the sun and the moon because you will go wrong? Is that what you're suggesting this says? Because I don't read that. I don't see that. It says if you neglect keeping it correctly, not obeying his commandments, they would go wrong with it and they would mess it up. And that has happened. Judah did go off of the calendar in 325, around that time, under Constantine, and fixed the calendar under Hillel. This is why it's called Hillel's calendar. And by the way, the only difference I've seen between the Hillel calendar and the Zadok calendar is how you guys reconcile the year. You do it differently than the Jews do it, that's for sure. But you keep the exact day as the Sabbath as they do. A fixed day. So, and they even say, I could bring a rabbi, a very close friend of mine, and he will tell you that absolutely, before the time of Constantine, that all of Judea, all Jews of the world kept the calendar according to what the Bible says, the sun and the moon. And the days of the calendar were just like the Bible says. If you look and read all the verses talking about the Sabbath, you'll see a certain days mentioned. That day's either going to be the 8th, the 15th, the 22nd is mentioned, because we can see in Exodus 16, the very first Sabbath they kept was the 22nd. So let's take all that information. How does that pattern fit? Because that's clearly a pattern that's laid out. And I don't see that anywhere with a Zadok calendar, anything explaining how the days work. We're told a Wednesday was the first day that they started, and that's at creation, as if we can determine. That doesn't even make any sense, because the Gregorian nor the Julian calendar existed at that time. And so that wasn't even being measured like that at the time. And I think things changed since the flood, since the time of Joshua's long day, since the time of Hezekiah in the degrees, since the crucifixion, since whatever happened at Julius Caesar's death, because there was also a 3-hour eclipse that happened. There's been obviously some astronomical events that's done something to our clock. I've heard people describe it as Yah's clock is dented, as if the clock fell off the wall and it hit the ground and it kind of got messed up a little bit, but it still works. Still, it's still equalized, might be off a little bit. That's what they suggest. I don't believe that. I believe it's perfect in its ways. And whether there was a perturbation that would happen, there would always be an equalization of the order of things. It would equalize back out. Now, that could take probably thousands of years to happen if there's a huge perturbation, right? So this is probably why we see from Enoch's time, and it does say somewhere in there, I read it somewhere, where there's 360 days, and then there's also a 4th day added, 4 days added in there. So I'm thinking, so since the time of Noah, something probably happened where the luminaries changed. I don't know, I'm speculating. The point is, you guys, I'm going deep down this rabbit hole, and I still don't have anybody who will come and talk to me and show me Bible verses and show me how we got this. It's basically a bunch of fragments of things pieced together with a lot of speculation, and I got to be honest with you, it seems illogical to me. It does, and it is very confusing. That the sun and the moon makes sense to me. I can see all of nature responding to the sun and the moon. Fish bite at a certain time. You can buy an app for your phone and go fishing based on the moon, and you'd be surprised at the results. I've done it. There's certain times you can go fishing and you will not catch a fish. And there's certain times that you can go and you can't stop catching. But it's got something to do with the moon. Very interesting. Animals, deer, but birds, they're all, bees are all affected by the sun and the moon. That is a fact. And incidentally, I think I'll kill off on the bees right now. And if you don't know, we're experiencing a high.
Just to interject something here, but not only the animals, but agriculture is affected as well. You have to plant and harvest in its season. You can't just willy-nilly go and do what you want and decide, I'm gonna plant this on a certain day, and it's out of season. In other words, you can't grow watermelon in the winter or strawberries in certain conditions, right? You have to have a season for that, right? Even your flowers that you buy, the little flower packs that you buy in the grocery store, it'll tell you for what zone that you're in when to plant. The Farmer's Almanac is based on that, folks. Farmers go by the sun and the moon. This is why Constantine did not forbid the agricultural people in ancient times from keeping the lunar solar calendar, because it was that important. If they had fixed the days, they would screw up the crops. People would go hungry. All right, so I just wanted to interject that.
Very high kill-off of bees. Some have suggested it's pesticides. Folks, this is happening worldwide. So either they're spraying the same pesticide everywhere simultaneously, and they might be doing that in disguise. I don't know, but I got a feeling it's got something to do with this intensity of the sun and the bursts that we've had, the solar radiation and things like that. That would be something more consistent to the whole Earth experiencing something that is affecting not just bees, but a lot of insects. There's huge die-offs of insects and bees right now. Very concerning signs of the time. So I'm still going down this rabbit hole. I would appreciate the prayer. We should all be praying for clarity on this and getting this right. It's very important to keep the appointed times and honor the Father and his commandments. So that's the whole point about this. It's not to stir the pot. It's not to be divisive. I really want to know. And the offer is still there. Anybody that can come and talk with me, in Zoom. We don't have to go on YouTube, just in Zoom. Let's go chapter and verse. Let's go line by line. Let's rightly divide it, and figure this thing out. So that's where I am on it, folks. I'm currently, keeping Passover, which will be on the 12th. By the way, I'll be in North Florida with the congregation that is meeting up there. Huge, huge community. I love my community. Can't wait to see you guys. Hope I can go. I'm kind of on a very strict budget right now, and that's not something I planned for very well. So we'll see. I'm trying to get up there, but if you can, we'll see you guys there with that group, the solar-lunar Hebrews of North Florida. And they're coming from a lot of places. It's not just North Florida. That's where we're meeting. There's some coming from way up north, Indiana, and we had someone come to Sokote last year from Alaska, and all over. So people come from all over. It's going to be a great time. I love it. It's great fellowship, and it's a great time to study the Word and rightly divide together. And so I'll be up there teaching, and if you're going, I'll see you there. So that's all I got for you guys on it. Whatever you're doing, however you're keeping Shabbat, just honor the Father, but also be open for correction. I've done that. You guys, I'm not perfect. I've had to change my position on things several times. It's like the rapture. I've changed my position on the pronunciation of the name. The Shabbat, I used to be a Saturday keeper, right? So I'm the kind of person that I'd rather know the truth. Like when I realized that the name Jesus was only 500 years old, it seemed absurd to me to keep calling him Jesus when I realized not even his mother called him that. So that made me want to call him by his real historic name. You can call him what you want, but for me, authenticity and being real is where I want to be. So shalom to you guys. Thank you for watching. Please, if you haven't subscribed, and give me a thumbs up. Help me spread this out. People need to know what the calendar is and how we should be keeping Shabbat. It's that important. Or I wouldn't be spending so much time looking at this and trying to teach you. It's quite frustrating, guys, to see people that waver back and forth, especially when you've shown them hard truth and biblical, just verse after verse after verse. And then still they have a hard time. It's quite frustrating. And not only that, you guys, I've got like 7 codes on the calendar that I've done, all pointing to what I just told you, that we're supposed to go by the sun and the moon, not just by the sun or just by the moon. Okay. And a lot of calendars do that. The Gregorian is solar only. The Hillel, even though they call it a solar lunar, it's basically a solar calendar because they fixed the day and they only observe the new month. So they don't base their Shabbat on keeping the new moon correctly. They just observe the new month coming in, right? And then blow through those days, keeping a continual 7-day, which is completely wrong. And as I said in here, all the religious Jews that I've talked to that know their Bible, that know the Torah, they admit the same thing. They all know that it was an agricultural calendar until the time of Hillel. That's not even a hidden thing. And I'm talking about those that know their Bible. You might find some Jews that have no clue because they never studied it. But and I'm talking about seasoned rabbis that have been to school all their life and been teaching all their life. This is common knowledge, folks.
It was an agricultural calendar. The Jews were pressed under Constantine and forced to fix a calendar. And in the edict of Constantine, they were forced to no longer to observe the Feast of Weeks or the new moons or anything. You could see that in the Constantine edict, folks. And I believe this is why they started counting omers, because they were commanded by the Romans not to count the weeks. And so what did they start doing? You don't see anywhere in your Bible it tells you to count omers. There's no commandment to do it. We just see in Exodus 16, that's what they were doing as a work week. But they were in fact counting all the way up into Shavuot. That's what Feast of Weeks is. And it all hinges on the grain. We cannot ignore that. We can't ignore the sun and the moon, nor can we ignore the grain, because this is an agricultural calendar. I do not see anywhere where the Zadok calendar recognizes. As you saw in the presentation there, they fixed the days with no regard to the moon and no regard to the grain, even though they fixed the and all the feasts are, every single one of them are connected to what the land produces, right? Even eating the matzah, the sheaf offering, the loaves offering. It's all because of what the earth is producing. That's what this feast's all about. And by the way, they're also connected to Yeshua. He fulfills all of them. He's the lamb, right? So there's a lot to this. And I wouldn't have been on this calendar so many years if I thought that it was wrong. I've seen the precision in it. I know there's concerns about, keeping the moon, and we do it. If you do it wrong, everything's good. I see what it says in Jubilees, but I see what Jubilees says for what it means. That if you neglect to keep it, you will go wrong. Okay? And that can be said for anybody else that is keeping any other kind of calendar and ignoring the moon. Guess what's going to happen? You're going to go wrong, because you're neglecting what the commandment says. Okay? So I'm still open on this. I would love for one of you guys that are teaching this to please come forward. Please meet with me. Show me, the Bible. Show me why in the Bible, don't bring me your presentation. We're not following the words of men. So I want to see where your data came from, not your presentation as if you're trying to convince me. Let's go line by line and address all of these things. I want to know why Wednesday is the day and how we get to that point. It's irrational to me to think that we can count continuously 7 days from creation, starting with a Wednesday, and it all matches up. I have a hard time believing that. So again, I'm very open. I'm not looking for any contention or stirring the pot or making anybody mad or devising or anything. There's enough of that going on. I'm legitimately trying to reconcile this. I don't want to lose friends over it. You guys, I had Brother Gerald, unfriended me because he got offended. You shouldn't be teaching the Bible if you're going to get offended like that when someone's trying to engage you and ask you, show me this in the Bible. Show me how you get this. That's just wrong. Whatever. There's no skin off my back, but it's a little concerning to me that you're a teacher, but yet come teach. Come teach. Come teach us. Don't just declare. That's a bunch of bull crap. We don't debate, we declare. That's the most foolish thing I've ever heard. So that's what I got for you folks. I'm going to wrap it up right here. I love you guys. And that's why I do this. I don't do it because I like being on YouTube. I don't like getting on camera, folks. But it's what I do. And it's important. And I have been called to do this. I've come, not just the calendar, but everything I do on YouTube with the codes. The Bible the traditions from the Bible, the statutes, the ordinances, all those things are important to me, and I hope they are to you as well. Shalom to you. May your day be blessed. Folks, if you can, please support the channel in some way. We could use a donation. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it up to Passover if I don't get, something coming in. I got too much going out so if you can, please help. I would really appreciate it. Shalom to you. I love you. We'll see you in the next video.